Hello there folks, it's Robots back here today to do another video. I join you today on this slightly hot but thankfully not as uncomfortable day that it has been over the last couple of days and over the last few weeks as well, because this weather has been unbearable. And me being a person who's not a fan of hot weather, it's a bit difficult for me to really tolerate that sort of thing, but there you go. But yes, I'm back here today to do another video. Not one of the videos that I have planned, which I probably might do next week or the week after, depends on how I do it. Instead, today I'm doing a movie review on something that I have recently seen and I really wanted to get in front of the camera and talk about it. And this is something that has gained a lot of hype and acclaim from different sources. And that, of course, I'm talking about Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim. And my feelings towards this as well regarding this film, because this is probably one of the only films of this summer that I was really hyped to see, because this summer, aside from a few films that haven't really caught my attention, it's been kind of really abysmal, I think. So this film really did stand out to me as being one of the one film that I think managed to restore a little bit of hope to the summer blockbuster films that have kind of really been an up and down slope, I think. So quick thoughts on what I thought about it. It's a fun, but it's a fun, big blockbuster summer action film. But it's not Guillermo del Toro's best film, and that's just my opinion. I could be so wrong on that from so many different people, but opinions are more than welcome depending on what type of film goer you are when it comes to this sort of film. And Pacific Rim really is one that I've been very keen about for quite some time, because Guillermo del Toro, if you know who he is, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there do, will know that he is a very specific type of filmmaker who does a very certain type of movie. If you've seen films like Pan's Labyrinth or Pan's Labyrinth or Devil's Backbone or even Hellboy 1 and 2, any of his films, if you follow that closely to his entire back catalogue, then you know the sorts of films that he's made and the stories that he's tried to tell in those movies. So this film feels a little bit weird for him to really do, I think. And with that being said, there are so many different ways you can really look at this film, I think, because this film from the very beginning, from the advertising that has come and gone quite recently, the trailers and the posters and the promotions that this film has had quite recently in order to give it the hype that it has deserved, it really feels kind of weird, I think, for this film, because this film really doesn't look like it was directed by Guillermo del Toro. In fact, I almost feel that that it was directed by someone else. But then again, if you look at it really closely, you can almost feel his style really working into this film. And the best way to really look at it, well, the thing is, there are so many ways you can look at it. Many people can see it as just being nothing more than a big, dumb, stupid popcorn film, like most summer blockbuster films normally are nowadays. But I think what this film really is, and this is how I've really seen it is as a throwback to a lot of the kaiju films that have come and gone over the years, or over the several decades. Godzilla being the most well-known one, or Gamera, or Mothra, or Gigador, or any of those films, any of those films at all. And for Guillermo del Toro to tackle a film of this particular genre, which he has done surprisingly well in this film really does feel like a homage to those classics. And Del Toro, who is one of my favorite directors, for him to do something like this really it feels really alien for him to really do this, I think. So, and I remember distinctively that he said that this film really does have a sort of love letter feel to the kaiju classics. And if I remember correctly, Del Toro also said that he paid a certain homage to, he used two references to really emulate this movie, which were, I think, the first reference, I think, was a painting by Francisco Goya called The Colossus, which really gives you the sort of evoking sense of awe with the film's battles that go on throughout this film, as well as another reference, which is a very well-known painting by Hokusai, which is the Great Wave off of Kanagawa, which is a reference to use for the ocean's battles. And those are two references to really use quite well for this film, I think. So with this film really being what it is, it's really difficult for me to really talk about, because being someone who... And, okay, I'll get back onto this. I'll get back onto this in a second. But this film also, as well, aside from paying a sort of love letter to the kaiju films, really I think pays a sort of interesting look at how the majority of a lot of mech anime goes along. In the whole basis for any mech anime is you have a human pilot piloting a giant robot. So any mech anime over the years, like Macross or Gundam or Evangelion, any of those films, this film does a very good job of trying to really take that concept and make it a little bit more real. I think in this film, more or less. And with this film, it does it very well. So with Pacific Rim, I didn't go in there expecting anything of any real major grand proportion, but the best thing, though, that I do feel that this film managed to do so well is it told its story and it spoke its message clearly without making it seem a little bit patronizing, which, coming off like this sort of movie, it feels a little bit weird, I think, and that's not making too much sense, but I'll try to explain. So I think the best place to really start with this film is at the very beginning with the plot of this film, and I won't go ahead and give away any of the spoilers for anyone who hasn't already seen this film. If you've seen this film, then you already know the film's whole plot. So this film review is probably going to be very spoiler free, so I won't go into any spoilers at all. Anyway. So the long and short of the plot, it really isn't anything that complicated, it revolves around monsters known as the kaiju, which in Japanese kaiju is Japanese for monster, which goes back to the whole Godzilla thing. The kaiju basically invade the Earth through a rift in the Pacific Ocean, which is deep beneath, which is in the deepest part of the ocean, and they pretty much level most of the Earth to being a wasteland and reducing most of Earth's resources. So, in order to counteract this problem, Earth's government and Earth's countries have joined forces together under one roof to combat the kaiju by building a secret weapon, a giant robot, of course, called the Jaegers. And the Jaegers, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the Jaegers are the Jaeger is German for hunter, if I'm not mistaken. So if I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But the Jaegers are an interesting design for a robot, in the rather than having the traditional fashion of where in most mech animes you have one pilot piloting these giant robots, where instead it's now two people piloting these giant robots. And what the whole system revolves around is the Jaegers are controlled simultaneously by two pilots whose minds are locked in a neural bridge, so they share memories with one another. And of course, that all goes fairly well throughout the most part. So really, that's the whole gist of the whole plot. Really, it revolves around giant robots fighting giant monsters. That's it. And it really, from looking at this film, really feels like a child's dream of. And I think that's what Guillermo del Toro said, is that it really, trying to really give that little sense of that whole childlike dream of if you had your own robot and you fought against a giant monster, that would be kind of like that whole childhood feeling, I think. So that's really the whole thing that really does very well, that translates very well in this film. With that being said, though, I still feel that this film felt a little bit weird in terms of what it was trying to do, though, because unlike most of Del Toro's films, and this has not got anything to do with the fact that Guillermo del Toro isn't a great director. He is really one of the very few directors in modern cinema that knows how to tell a very well tightly woven story, and he manages to convey different sorts of themes with those stories, mostly in horror and fantasy. But this film really does feel a little bit weird in terms of what it was trying to do. Nonetheless, though, I thought it was a pretty good film. So, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the things involved in this film. In that the things that I liked about this movie, which is no surprise why this film really stood out for me. Being someone who's an anime fan and being someone who really was surprised with how they would handle this concept of humans piloting giant robots, it's interesting to see how that how that concept works. So. Let's see. The one thing I will address firsthand is the kaiju, which are the main antagonists of this film, who are the monsters of this movie. Now, the kaiju have a really interesting look to them, I think. Particularly in how alien they look. And since they are supposed to be aliens, they each have a very different looking style. They each have a different fighting maneuverability and a fighting style that makes them go head to head against the Jaegers. And seeing these things go head to head against these giant robots really offers you a sort of gravity to what to expect with these things clashing with one another. And the one kaiju that I can remember distinctively was one that I have seen toys that were designed by NECA, and which was featured quite a little bit in the advertising, which was a kaiju by the name of what was it? The Knife Head, I believe. It's basically a goblin shark with arms and legs, and that's not giving anything away. If you've seen this thing already, then you already know what it is. But it's interesting to see how that monster looks, because it's a goblin shark with four arms, and he's walking on two legs, and that's done so well with seeing that monster go head to head against one of the Jaegers. Who I'm trying to remember one of the names of the Jaegers. I think one of them's called Gypsy Danger, which is piloted by Charlie Hunnam's character, I believe. So yeah, seeing the monsters do battle with these giant robots really is interesting to see how that concept handles, and it's weird as well because normally in most anime as well, specifically in a lot of mech anime, aside from with titles like Mason Goods, Get a Robo or things like that, you see the giant robots going head to head against other giant robots. And sometimes, depending on the anime that you're watching, you often do see giant robots going head to head against giant monsters. So that concept is handled fairly well. In this, it's done surprisingly well because when you see these things grappling with each other in the ocean and on land as well, because the fight in Hong Kong, which that's not a spoiler as well. That's in the trailer as well if you've already seen it. Really gives you a sense of devastation of what gives you a sense of devastation. It gives you a real sense of what devastation these things can unleash in a populated area, and it's up to the Jaegers, these giant robots, to save humanity from these monsters, and it's done so well in this. So really, I think the one thing that I think really stood out for me was the kaiju. The kaiju in this film really are gorgeously designed, really interesting looking monsters. And the Jaegers as well. The Jaegers are interesting looking robots. And the only aside from Gypsy Danger, who was the one that was piloted by Charlie Hunnam's character, I think his name's Riley Beckett or something. Yeah, so there's that, and then there's Crimson Typhoon, which I believe is piloted by China, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And of course, the one which really stood out for me, not stood out for me. The one that I think stood out because it had a very interesting looking design was Cherno Alpha, which is the specific Jaeger that is piloted specifically by the Russians. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see all these countries band together to take on these monsters, putting all differences aside over the years to face a common foe. I think that's really interesting to see how that concept really takes effect. In this, it's done well to see these giant robots fighting these monsters. So the Jaegers, I think, have really interesting designs to them. There's nothing too overly complicated about these designs. They're very simple-looking designs. When you look at them, when you look at the concept art as well of these things, you can see how simple they look compared to how most giant robots look in a lot of different animes. You can really compare one another and say, "Oh, that's a simple design," or "That's less complicated than what it should be." If that makes any sense. What else? What else I really like? Aside from it really being aside from this film really being basically nothing more than giant robots going head to head against giant monsters, I think this film really manages to really give you a sense of what to see with the two main characters, Charlie Hunnam's character, Riley Beckett, and what's her name? I can't remember the name of the actress. Rinko Kikuchi, who plays a character by the name of Mako Mori, who is her backstory. I think is one that's quite interesting. If you've seen the film, then you know what it is. I won't spoil it here. So it's interesting to see these two characters play off one another, and see them interact with one another, and team up in this one Jaeger that they're piloting, and seeing Mako Mori and seeing her character really develop a little bit. And though Mako possesses a strength and fury, which you feel that her character is being held back a little bit from being under Idris Elba's character, Saka Pentecost, I think his name is. It's interesting to see her move from one step to the next, which is an interesting concept as well. Just seeing Riley Beckett show Mako Mori the ropes and give her the push that she needs to go into the scene and avenge and get revenge for what happened in her life against these giant monsters. So that really is interesting to see that happen. The rest of the cast, I didn't have a problem with the rest of the cast in this one. There wasn't any actor or any actress that I had a problem with. All the characters were fine for what they were. A little bit undeveloped, but I think if there's something, there are a few things that are there are a lot of good things to like about this film, specifically in the characters and how interesting they are. Some of them are not very well developed though, and I think that could have been fixed, but hey ho. But the one character that I can remember because I saw him in the trailer, and this just goes to show how much of a pedigree he has with Guillermo del Toro, is Ron Perlman's character, Hannibal Chow, which I really liked a lot. If you've seen the film, this is just a minor spoiler if you've read it already. His whole role in the film is he's playing a organs dealer who basically sells kaiju organs on the black market for a specific price. So his character really was one that I was a bit fascinated by, and seeing what happened to him throughout that film was kind of interesting as well. Especially when you see Ron Perlman interact with one of the scientists. I think his name's Dr. Newton Geisler, who's played by Charlie Day. Just seeing these two characters interact with one another. Who Charlie Day's character and Bern Gorman's character. Bern Gorman, who plays another scientist, Dr. Herman Gottlieb. Both these two characters play off quite well with each other. It's the comedy that's not too forced, but I think it's something you can get a little bit of a chuckle out of, and it's done so well. Particularly Bern Gorman's character. If you know who Bern Gorman is, he was in Game of Thrones. But just seeing these two actors play off one another, there's a little bit of chemistry in there, and it's done so well. With that being said, there are a couple of things to like about this film. Cast-wise, there was nothing out of the ordinary. The cast, I think, was fine. I still think that this film... Oh, okay, I'll say one thing right now. Is this film perfect by any means? No, not by a long stretch. I will say right now, and this is probably going to make me sound a little bit unpopular, but this isn't one of Guillermo del Toro's best films. In that, I mean, it feels weird for him to take on this specific sort of movie in this specific genre, because with many films over the years that have tried and failed with trying to make a decent robot movie, not counting Transformers, because there's an unnecessary debate between these two films, which these films and Pacific Rim, I don't want to bring that up here because it's pointless, But I will say one thing, though. Even though this film isn't one of Guillermo del Toro's best films, it's an interesting way, I think, and probably one of the only ways of doing a robot film where you have human characters piloting these giant robots who aren't sentient, who are controlled mostly by humans. And that concept is done very well in anime. And to see that concept in live action after quite a while, because I remember the last one that this was decades ago, that everyone remembers because it was such a bad movie, Robot Jocks, which did that concept quite poorly, I think, because the idea was good, but the concept was handled a bit poorly, just by that film being really bad because of what it was. So this film, I think, does that concept quite well, and really as well, it really gives you the idea of. It really gives you the idea that this concept is a little bit impossible to really achieve in live action because of the amount of money, the budget that you would need to put to pull off this concept of doing something like this. So seeing a concept like this involving humans piloting giant robots and live-actioning it a little bit, bringing that concept into live action. Guillermo del Toro has done it surprisingly well. With that being said, though, the film isn't perfect, but nonetheless, that's something that a sequel can't fix. I think that this film could use a lot of room for improvement, which is why I think a sequel would probably improve on that beneficially. Might seem a little bit unnecessary, but nonetheless, I think that this film could use some little bit of improvement, because there are so many different ways, so many different directions you could do this. The characters in this film. There are so many directions in which you could take them and really develop them and make sure that they move on to different things. So, and to see what happens next from there. Because with these guys going head to head against giant monsters really doesn't seem like the be-all, end-all story for these guys. So, is the film good? Yes. I thoroughly recommend that you go see it. Don't expect anything really of the normal Del Toro fashion. Expect something that would really give you a sense of amazement of what to expect from a summer blockbuster film, and something that's special, I think, because this film really does that concept. It does. I keep using this a little bit more. It harkens back to a specific genre that I think really could do with a little bit of reinvention. And with that being said, with the remake of Godzilla that we'll be getting next year, next year or the year after, I think, it really does seem like kaiju films might make a sort of comeback, I think, thanks to this. With that being said, though, this I remember a video that TF Knowlesy did a little while ago when he saw this film, and what are the possibilities and the outcomes that you can get out of making something like this. And by that he meant, would we see any mecha anime being adapted to live action? Here's the problem with that, though. Okay, it's no argument here that we will never see an Evangelion film. There are so many things stacked up against that film to ever being made. The religious theme, well, not the religious theme, but the whole religious, the whole angels thing, which I cannot see that getting passed by any censorship unless they change the name, which that seems possible, but then again, though, it might irritate the fans of this product. Animes like Macross, or Gundam, or Mason Guzzi, or Get a Robo, those sorts of products I could easily see getting adapted into live action. I know that there have been plans for a Robotech film that have been in development for quite some time, but I don't know what's happening with that film anymore. So I would think the best thing to do is for any of those products to really take a leap forward into live action and see how that concept would turn out, because this film really has gave that genre, I think, a little bit of a Kickstarter in bringing those animes into live action, into mainstream cinema. And I think with this, it does that very well. So, with that being said, honestly, go see it. It's not... I will say right now, and because of what happened recently in Grown Ups 2, kind of beating this out a little bit at the box office, stop what you're doing and go see Pacific Rim, because this film was highly enjoyable. It's a fun, loud, very alien to what Guillermo del Toro normally does, but it's a fun movie that I think really delivers everything that it expects from an action film, with giant fighting robots fighting giant monsters. So that's really all I can say about that. Go see it and enjoy it for what it is. And really, I would like to see this concept I would like to see how this would be taken into the future of any other films that might take this genre a little bit further. Still, I think with Guillermo del Toro, it's concepts like this that are done very well. So with Pacific Rim, seeing giant monsters on the big screen after so many years is a special treat, I think, for anyone who's a fan of kaiju films. If you're a fan of kaiju or tokusatsu, you will really enjoy this film. And me not being a fan of tokusatsu, I really thought this film was fantastic. It's not perfect, but then again, what is? So, anyway, yes, that's it for me. That's my less than insightful review on Pacific Rim. I urge you to go see this film. It deserves your attention, despite a few of the things that I've got against it. So until then, everybody, thanks for watching. Take care. See you soon.